I'm going to start my Dvar Torah with a side note. Especially those of you who have continued to follow the course Introduction to Kabbalah. We talked on Friday. I talked on Friday. Actually, I was the only one who talked on Friday. On Tuesday, about the names of God. And this week's Torah portion, I wrote it down, opens with Vayedaber Elohim el Moshe. And Elohim spoke to Moses. Now Elohim is the I don't want to call it the name of God, but it's the word that points to the divine as it expresses as everything. Right? I just talked about Elohechem, right? Elohim is the general term, the universal term, actually. Vayedaber Elohim, right? And that which is everything spoke to Moses. I always wonder what people hear when that happens. Spoke. What does that mean? How do you hear everything talking? The totality is talking. Never mind, just wrestle with that. It's gorgeous enough. Vayedaber Elohim, and Elohim talked to Moses, lemor, vayomer, and that presence said, elav, to him, ani Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Elohim speaks to Moses and tells Moses that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. There can't be any more. So Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the finger pointing at that which exists prior to everything being created. Right? So Elohim is the finger that points to the divine being everything. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the finger that points to the divine being nothing. That which exists prior to everything, and out of which everything comes to be. Just like this word comes out of the silence, cannot exist without the silence. The silence gives it birth, and this word returns to the silence when the sentence is over. Do you feel that coming out of the silence, back in the silence? Right? So that's an analogy to how does everything comes to be. Out of nothingness, everythingness exists. Without the nothingness, everythingness could not be, because everythingness arises from within the nothingness. And that's that sentence. The Torah tells us that the everythingness, Elohim, is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The absolute immanence, the totality of being, is the absence of being. Everything is nothing. Nothing is everything. Emptiness is form. In other tradition, we hear that. Emptiness is form. Right there, the first sentence of our weekly Torah portion. But that's not at all what I want to talk about. I said it was a side note. So put that in your pocket. Emptiness is form. God said to Moses, I am everything and nothing. Okay, close the book. We're done. That's it. I mean, everything else is commentaries, as Hillel said. So we meet Moses and Aaron this week as the Torah portion opens, already arguing with Pharaoh, let my people go. trying to get Pharaoh to free the Israelites from the slavery they have been under for generations now. But as we open the book, it feels like we missed a lot of the story that leads up to this moment. So I want to travel back in time a little bit, some 5,000-ish years. Because what we've missed here is who Moses has become between the moment he leaves Egypt and the moment he returns to Egypt to face Pharaoh. And he's left, the Torah tells us, many years ago. He's left. It's been many years, as the Torah says, since Moses left. Now, how many years? Since the Torah says it's been many years, how many years? The Torah doesn't say how many years. It's completely ignoring that question that obviously every single rabbi will ask. How many years? Because the only time reference in the Torah saying anything about the time that has elapsed is a long time after that, whatever that meant, the king of Egypt died. That's the only time reference that we have. A long time after that, the king of Egypt died. Why is that important in the story? Well, because that signals that Moses can come back now. Why? Because it seems that all that generation of leadership in Egypt that witnessed and was there when Moses murdered the Egyptian taskmaster, which is the reason why he had to flee, because his life was in danger, having killed a police officer. All of that generation of leadership in the court of Pharaoh had died. And so the memory of that had, dissipated, had gone with the death of that generation. So the Torah tells us that, not to tell us how long it's been since Moses left, but to tell us Moses is about to come back now. It's all right. His life is no longer in danger if he comes back. But of course, that doesn't satisfy any rabbi worth his kosher salt. So the Ramban, Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, also known as Nachmanides, tells us in his commentary that it's been 60 plus years. Give or take, 60 plus years. We don't exactly know how old Moses was when he fled from Egypt. The only note of that in Torah is that just before he goes out and kills the taskmaster, the Torah says that he was all grown up. In Judaism, he could be just had his bar mitzvah or something. He was all grown. I'm a man now, so he was. Who knows? But we know that Moses was 80 years old when he came back to the court of Pharaoh, and that's kind of an easy thing to figure out because we've already read the rest of the Torah. We tricked it. And we know that Moses dies at 120. And we know that the sojourn, the journey through the wilderness, through the desert, was 40 years. So the time that he's come to Pharaoh's court is 80. And Nachmanides tells us that he was probably in his late teens when he left. Probably my son's age, 19 years old. And so he comes back 60-ish years later. And so as he fled, let's say about when he was 19 years old. He arrives at the well in the story. He escapes from Egypt and he wanders who knows how long to get to Midian, where he finds a well to obviously get water from. And that's where he meets the daughters of the priest of Midian, the 7 daughters of the priest of Midian. 7 is a very interesting number in Kabbalah, of course, and in the Kabbalistic tree of life. But when he meets the daughters of, we're going to call him Jethro for now, because it's the most common name, but that's actually, I'm going to switch that in a moment. Because Jethro, actually in Torah, has many names. Almost every time that Torah refers to him, it's almost every time that he's got a different name. Actually, I'm going to give it to you right now. In that moment when Moses is first introduced to his family and his daughters, he's called Reuel. Reuel. And that's a fascinating name. It could mean 2 things. It could come from it's with an ayin, so it has nothing to do with seeing, which is ro'eh. It says ro'eh with an ayin, which is connected to 2 possibilities. Either to the word shepherd, like a ro'eh tzon is a shepherd. In this case, if it was Reuel, it would be the shepherd of God. God, he's acting as the shepherd on behalf of God. That's what it would mean. Or from the expression ve'ahavta lere'echa kamocha, you shall love your, usually translated as your neighbor, as yourself. Re'echa in this case is your friend, actually. So it could be God's friend. Reuel could be God's friend. Either way, we're talking about someone who is highly evolved spiritually. It's no wonder that he's the high priest of Midian. And I think that sets the tone for Moses, who is going to spend 60 years learning at the feet of his great master, Jethro, Reuel, the priest of Midian. And he's going to spend these 60 years in this apprenticeship with Reuel. Which, by the way, becomes his father-in-law as well. Moses' father-in-law he marries Tzipporah, one of the 7 daughters. Tzipporah is a beautiful name. It means bird. Her name means bird. What really interests and resonates with me in this story is really the connection to Moses spending 60 years of his life as a shepherd. I mean, what is the life of a shepherd? And especially in those days, you take the flock and you go on long journeys, walking through the wilderness all by yourself, together with the flock, but all by yourself in the silence of the space you travel through. And I imagine Moses spending most of those 60 years alone in the great silence of the desert, between the land of Midian and the Sinai Peninsula, which is where he travels with the flock. We know that because at some point there's the burning bush scene, which happens at the foot of Mount Chorev, which is Mount Sinai. So he's traveling through this wilderness of the desert of Sinai and the land of Midian, and he's alone. He's alone in the wilderness. It made me think of Henry David Thoreau. I wrote it down, the quote. I've changed just one word to make it work. I went into the wilderness. That's the word that I changed. Because he went into the woods. I went, and there's no woods in the Sinai, let me tell you that. I was there, so I can tell you. I went into the wilderness because I wished to live deliberately. I'm thinking of Moses, right? I went into the wilderness because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. I just love that. I went into the wilderness because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. And why does this resonate with me deeply right now? Is because I find myself in this wilderness, in the great silence of my life right now. Of course, I could push the analogy and use the English expression of shepherds and clergy people, but I don't know if I want to go that far. But really touched me and moved me as I try to embody Moses' experience is the silence that he was surrounded with, is the emptiness of the vastness of the scenery around him, completely empty, which is why it's not the woods, and it's different. And connecting to his utter aloneness of the deserts that he travels and I travel through every day. I hope I'm not going to have to do that for 60 years, but that would put me at 110. That would give me another 10 years, but that place, for me, and I imagine for Moses as well, is a place of pain and is a place of grief. And there's a part of me that believes that Moses also went through some time of grieving that he was no longer the prince of Egypt, and mourning that. What was interesting also is that just like Moses was a prince in Egypt and went into exile, that's another side note, so did Gautama the Buddha. And I'm just touched by the parallel in those two stories, both princes in their own right and both going into exile to find truth, to find the essential facts of life, I guess. And I too, I'm finding when the clouds of sadness and grief suddenly clear for a few moments, I find the aloneness and the silence actually quite attractive. Paradoxically. And I've been really mindful how things have naturally slowed down in my life. I don't feel any rush to do anything. I've been really good at saying no to meetings, which never happens. I always say yes. But I've been really good at saying no lately. I just want to concentrate on, as Thoreau would say, the essential facts of life. I want to really live, like he says, deliberately. And that's what's opening. That's what's opening for me in this moment. I decided to get on a news diet. It's been really good. Since the news, it's the same ones, just different characters, but same theater. And I have committed to only doing things that brings me joy, that enlivens me. So a lot of a lot of my day-to-day work has kind of fallen to the side. I just don't have the energy for a lot. I'm good at replying to emails though, so don't be afraid. That's not what I mean by that. I think what I would say is happening for me is in the face of this life moment, that as my practice, I am embracing my powerlessness. I feel that I am, as a choiceless choice, perhaps, I'm being surrendered. I'm being unraveled. I'm being defeated. And I have open-heartedly accepted it as what is right now. And there may be a power greater than myself that is working in ways that I don't understand, that I'm surrendered to. And in those moments when I'm able to be in that space, then it's okay. It really is okay. Until things move and shift again, of course. So I have come to a place where I really want to dedicate myself to live authentically. And that means to live in a place of great vulnerability and to be okay, as I am trying to be right now, sharing this with you. Because it will be very easy for me to hole up in a corner and just not tell you what's going on. And just put a mask and I don't think that's helpful to me, and I don't think that is helpful to you, because I think I'm not the only one. I think all of us are going through some version of grieving, of letting go, of just trying to find what's next and what's opening. So I decided that I would let you in instead of shutting you out. And I hope it's supportive of all of us, Because I think it's important to live in those beautiful places of authenticity, even when it's painful. To live in those places of realness, even if it's really raw and tender. And so maybe to close the analogy, I'll end with a psalm, just the first sentence, because I think it's really true for me right now. The Eternal is my shepherd. I shall not want. Amen.